Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Version 8 Marketing Podcast. This podcast are for those interested in learning about modern day marketing strategies that can help you attract more customers. And today we have Jaco Gerrits in the house. Welcome, Jaco.
Thanks a lot, Janre. Happy to be here.
Awesome, man. You're quite a famous guy. There's a couple of people that have been on the podcast that I said the next guy is going to be Jaco Gerrits. And probably two of them already knew how you are. So it's a strike rate of 50%.
I hope for the right reasons, eh?
No, definitely for the right reasons, man. So thank you for coming in. For those listening, Jaco, obviously, you quite love a serial entrepreneur at the end of the day. Like, you're busy with a couple of different things and you've hit some successes. Obviously, you've had some failures. And that's
Many more failures than successes.
Yeah, like most entrepreneurs at the end of the day. So what we're going to talk about is, a couple of the ventures that you're busy with, and then specifically how, you've used marketing, specifically digital marketing, in order to, help you grow those entities. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But I think before we start, give us the origins of Jaco Gerrits.
Yeah, so I started the first company 18 years ago where I did consulting work for the mining industry and also for local government. So I started an initiative called Tembela.
How old were you when you started your first
business?
business?
22, so now
Damn,
I'm giving away
I was
my
22.
age. So that explains the grey hair. So with Tembela, what we did is it was a Department of Minerals and Resources requirement for mining companies to submit a social and labour plan. And the social and labour plan basically dictated how they're going to engage with the local community. But there were some practicalities around that. So obviously, if you say that you're going to focus on local job creation and local procurement, then how do you engage with the local community? So I built a system called Tembela, where we went into the community, registered all of the job seekers along with the skills that they have, and all of the small businesses along with the commodities that they supply, so products and services, so you can get an overview of the local economy. So that was phase one. So typically we went into the community, we recruited from the local community, and then in a period of 4 to 8 weeks, we would register 20, 30,000 people.
Oh, okay.
Obviously along with their skills, qualifications,
Yes.
and then the same for small businesses as well. So now you've got an overview in terms of the capacity that exists. So what we can do then is we can channel legislative spend to build capacity that does not yet exist.
Yeah.
Because obviously the mine has got a plan in terms of future production and the kind of skills that they'll require. So the first phase is to obviously channel legislative spend into the community to build capacity in order for them to obviously go for the future opportunities that will materialize. And then the second one is as part of establishing the mine and then other activities of contractors that will work for the mine, including local government, to expose that platform so that they can recruit and procure locally. So that's really what the platform did. So we tracked all of the spend that went through the platform. So you could say that mining company or contracting company working for the mining company has spent X amount of money within this community. So that's where it started. So I did a lot of consulting work. Initially, I actually just did the system consulting work, and then it ended up being Tembela, where I licensed the same technology back to other mining companies. Eventually sold out of that, used the same or similar technology to do trading between companies, which turned into Business Growth Solutions. So there we did a contract for MTN Businesses, where we registered all the small suppliers to basically engage with one another. So that was an interesting venture. I sold out of that. Then I ventured into a very interesting space, which was emotional intelligence leadership evaluation. So I started a company called Dynametric Solutions with Gavi Minnar. Company failed miserably, but learned very good lessons in terms of the intrapersonal and interpersonal.
Why do you think the company failed? Out of interest?
Well, the exit wasn't great.
Okay.
Basically, the company just died, and I think the biggest challenge there was just in terms of how we took the company to market. So it was a B2B business, focused on teams for corporates. And it was a self-assessment and then a 360 assessment over and above. So you can get an overview in terms of the intrapersonal dimensions as per the assessment that you did yourself, as well as the interpersonal dimensions. And then we would overlay that with the assessment of your peers, supervisors, and subordinates. So you get like a 360 view in terms of the different dimensions related to EQ specifically, which was a massive buzzword a couple of years ago. Still is. So, the company, not so successful. We had some wins, some big clients across the line, but eventually the company closed down, so no exit there. But
money lost?
No. So we didn't lose money, fortunately. But
Okay,
I think the lessons gained,
yeah.
just in terms of EQ and how important that is.
Can't put a price on that.
Absolutely, and just personally within my organization, and then also obviously the relationships that you need to manage. How important it is to have a good relationship with self, and how to focus on personal development continuously. And,
Yes.
I think like the skills that I acquired there is probably skills that I used quite well in my entrepreneurial ventures going forward. So that's why I say it was probably like one of my biggest wins. Although the business,
100%.
the business itself was
Getting goosebumps.
was maybe not that successful.
That's so cool, man. And the thing is, I think a lot of people always see success as making money, and at the end of the day, like
is not. Yeah,
100%. And after that,
so after that, I started a company called Denpits. So with Denpits, it's actually a funny story because I backed out of the garage the one day and I scratched the side of my car, and I left that scratch there for about 3-4 months, and I got back from a meeting with Innovation Group, and I saw an auto body repair shop, and I said, okay, let me just quickly pop in there so they can give me a quote. And when they did the assessment on the scratch, I saw that it was only a visual assessment. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I probably have to go like to 2 or 3 other shops now just to get comparative quotes.
Yes.
But then I thought, I was standing with my phone in my hand, I'm like, well, why can't I just take like 4 photos of the scratch, and why can't I just go to qualifying shops in the area?
Because everybody's going to do the same thing, probably.
Yeah, and it's a visual assessment at the end of the day. I mean, if it's panel damage only and it's not structural damage, then the assessment is nothing other than visual. So if we can take photos with, let's say, an app, then send it to qualifying shops that are allowed to work on the vehicle, and that can come back to the customer, then that's a good user experience.
Yes.
So that's where Denpits started. And there was a couple of interesting lessons that came out of Denpits as well. So just on Denpits, the business model is one where we earned a percentage of the repair value.
Makes sense.
And we were obviously targeting the uninsured market predominantly. And the challenge with the business was not so much signing up shops. We had a panel of about 220 shops at the end of the day after about 9 months of marketing activity. So we could sign the shops up, and we could also get quotes for the customers.
People didn't have the money.
So we did digital marketing, and we could get people into the workflow to get, let's say, comparative quotes.
Yeah.
But exactly that, people didn't have money to.
When you said the
actually
uninsured market, that's where my mind went. Yeah.
Yeah. So we then looked at developing a loan product where people could obviously then like apply for a loan in order to get the car fixed. And during that time, we learned a lot of lessons in the dealership channel around distribution, the kind of products that the guys were looking for, because most of the products that they would sell through a dealership as part of a second growth opportunity. So like to all of the people that's listening, that's where the dealerships really make good money, is like the value-added products that they bundle into the finance deal. So there we realized that there were certain constraints around regulated products. So that's basically financial products or insurance product. So commission that they could pass on to the dealership is limited or regulated. And during that time, I thought of other products within the automotive vertical because we built up good relationships in that channel. And I was reading about the accelerometer on the phone and what you could potentially do with it in terms of detecting impact. And I thought, well, why can't we do trip detection and then impact detection, potentially crash detection on a phone?
Yes.
So it's interesting how that company came about as a result of the activities that were performed for Denpits.
So Crash Detect is currently one of your ventures,
yeah,
right?
Crash Detect is currently one of the ventures, and it really was as a result of what we did with Denpits, which ended up being a failure.
Yeah.
But Crash Detect would never have materialized if it was not for the activities that we performed as part of Denpits.
It's all these rabbit holes that you have to get into. And the deeper you go, the more you learn, and that creates the next opportunity. It's connecting dots.
Absolutely, and I think we jokingly said that it was failures, but it is definitely not failures. I mean, it's pretty the best lessons that you could ever learn. Yeah. And out of the lessons, so every failure or lesson that was learned, even though the company might not have proceeded, there was a lot of lovely relationships that came out of that. And there's relationships out of the previous ventures that up until today, we still do business together. And if it was not for those lessons/failures, then the relationships would never have been there.
I'm going to ask you one question for my selfish reasons. And then for the listeners, let's move on to all the different ventures that you're currently busy with. You said you tackled the uninsured market. Out of interest, why didn't you guys tackle the insurance companies and...
Yeah, so we funny enough, we had a couple of discussions with some of the bigger insurers around how we could potentially license the technology and then drive down the claims cost in their environments. And the challenge there is just doing B2B business. So you'll go in there. We had great excitement from one of the big insurers. They wanted to license the technology, and then I think corporate politics intervened again.
Always.
And then you sit in the sales cycle that ends up being like a year. And then what you initially pitched is no longer what the solution becomes, up until a point where you say, but
decision makers have left, went somewhere else.
Exactly, and I think that keeps on happening, and I think it's it's very unfortunate for entrepreneurs if you want to do like B2B business, especially with bigger corporates. It's just a reality. It's part of the game. I mean, we've got a telco now that we're working with, and that has taken us 2.5 years. It's worthwhile now, but I mean, it's just a reality in terms of the sales cycle.
Patience is the name of the game.
Absolutely. No, you have to be very patient. So that was always like on the cards. And funny enough, with what we're doing in the automotive vertical now, I can't disclose too much in terms of what we're doing with the rebranding strategy. But in the automotive vertical, we are actually going to incorporate some of the elements of the inputs that we did back in the day. Will this be us doing it ourselves? Probably not, but at least we learned some good lessons. So if we partner with another entity, I think we know how to position it for the customer and also how to have the backend in place, including obviously the service provider network. So awesome. I'm very excited because we are actually going to be operating in that space again very soon.
Yeah, man, and you go back and now you've sharpened your samurai sword.
Absolutely, and it's funny because we've got a great relationship with one of the biggest short-term insurers in the country. So we licensed the crash detect technology to First for Women and to Auto in general. So it runs in the Guardian Agile on Call app and Auto SOS. And we had a discussion the other day, and they said, you know what, like 6-7 years ago, there was this like really cool startup, Denpits. I was like part of one of the presentations, and that tech was like brilliant, but it was like ahead of its time. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Tell me more. And we said, no, there was a guy that did like a very convincing presentation.
Yeah, he didn't have grey hair, but
he didn't have grey hair. But yeah, funny enough, they then said, okay, well, maybe there's something worth exploring again. And obviously, I mean, with the inputs where it is currently, it's probably not something that we will pursue now, but as part of the bigger initiative we have going within the automotive vertical, I think there definitely will be touch points. And again, I think it relates to what I've said earlier. It's like at the time you might have thought it was a failure, but again, that's something that's being revived like as we speak.
It's the cycle of entrepreneurship, man.
That's
so
true.
Cool. So Crash Detect, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so Crash Detect, in short, the proposition to the customer is it's a smartphone app. Once installed, you forget about it. If you start driving, it will monitor your trip. If you're involved in a serious car crash, it will detect the crash automatically, pinpoint your location, and then dispatch the nearest ambulance. Yeah. Also, what we do is as soon as we dispatch the ambulance, we supply the paramedics with all of your medical information. The reason for that is 12.5% of people that are involved in a motor vehicle accident receive incorrect medical treatment, purely due to a lack of information at the scene. So that's where we really started with the proposition. Then we said, okay, what can we do over and above? We introduced the medical emergency button, which connects you to a live paramedic that can assist you with any emergency situation, not just motor vehicle accidents. We've got a medical ID that also speaks to the lack of medical information, roadside security, and a whole host of other benefits. And over time, we kept on working on this proposition. And the thing with Crash Detect is it's very much... So we're speaking about digital marketing today. So typically if you do marketing, if you want to try and drive somebody across the line, you either need to take them away from pain or towards pleasure. Exactly. So with Crash Detect, the focus was very much like around pain. Even with the branding, it was dark and serious and scare tactics, if you want to call it that, in all of the campaigns. Yeah. And we started introducing pleasure items in the automotive vertical. And we performed a lot of split tests to say, okay, but if you take this proposition compared to this proposition, and the customer acquisition cost, if you take the two and compare it side by side, like how does it really compare? And pleasure is winning. And it's interesting because I read a lot of articles where people said that pain moves you further than pleasure. And the interesting thing is, so it didn't work like that in our environment. Yeah. And then we also saw some stats from Unbound. So I think it came out either earlier this year or end of last year, where they actually tested that specific element, and pleasure is one, like by a pretty big margin, which is interesting.
The thing is, it's all about customer psychology, and it constantly changes. So, from my research, I think pain was a big mover back in the 1990s to the 2000s, and I think slowly we're moving into an age where, people are spending more money to treat themselves, to enjoy life. Because if you look at our ancestors, they hoarded money, they tried to secure. I think there was a study done on the fact how millennials spend money, and it's more about the fact that we've learned from our ancestors that you work so hard your whole life, and you actually live scared of starting a business because it's so tough. So you stay with this job up until the age of you're 65, and then you get fired and retrenched, and you don't have your retirement package.
Yeah.
So I think war and all these things that have happened that have changed the customer psychology. And then we live in a world where millennials like ourselves and also Generation Zs, we like spending money.
Yeah.
So we don't save as much as our ancestors did. So we treat ourselves because we know life is short and we want to find that balance.
Yeah.
So in essence, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think just again, as a general, the rule of thumb is, every business, every product, every service is unique.
100.
So if you can, then try and test, because every assumption that you'll ever have is flawed. That's the only guarantee.
Oh, absolutely. And then you've got 3 other ventures. Could we touch on that quickly?
Yeah, so obviously Crashitech is taking up 90% of my time. We've got Plant IO Guys, which is like a little side project. So last year I just said that at the end of the day, if you look at digital marketing, it's only, in my opinion, it's the only way of marketing nowadays. And if you look at some of the other companies, what they're doing online, especially on industries which is a little bit more archaic, like plant.
Yes.
People are not necessarily ones that will adopt tech, even more so when it comes to marketing.
Mindsets.
Absolutely, and at the end of the day, it's just, again, people that's looking for something in particular. It could be a dozer or ADT or whatever the fact may be, and the reality is that those people are also looking for those items online. And the only thing that we need to do is we just need to find a customer more creatively and at a lower cost than the competition. So if we can do that, if you've got the leads, then ultimately you control the market. So the proposition there is, it's very similar to Denpits, where we said, okay, we'll get you 3 comparative quotes, let's say within 24 hours. So there we do exactly the same. It's just the product that we broker is different. And then obviously the deals we do on the back is also slightly different. So we don't need to have the assets. We only need to have the relationships, and we need to have the people that want to engage with those relationships.
Okay.
So it's call it like an information brokerage exchange, where we are just a little bit more creative in terms of the positioning, and we leverage off of our strengths, which is obviously the digital marketing side.
Yes. Awesome, man. And you said something about VapeMail, which is a vape subscription service?
Yeah, so VapeMail is an interesting one. Not that I vape myself.
Yeah, it's a massive trend, yeah.
Yeah, so one of my friends actually approached me a while back. And I don't know, I'm always one that wants to help out, especially if somebody is entrepreneurial and they want to start off with a new venture. So I said, well, tell me about this idea of yours. And he pitched the VapeMail idea. It was a subscription service. So I'm somebody that leans normally towards a annuity-based business. And I said, well, there could be something here. So we started up VapeMail, and in short, what that is, you can either define your own flavor preferences, and then we'll obviously show you selections, or you can go for specific brands, and then you build your subscription box. So there's different box sizes, and then we'll do a monthly delivery. So it's a subscription service where you get your juices every month. There are other opportunities in the insurance space that we are exploring as well. I think one of the key challenges for us in that business is the fact that you can't advertise on social media, on Google. There's restrictions because it's considered a tobacco product.
Yeah.
So that has been
very tricky.
Very, very tricky.
And how have you maneuvered around?
So the big thing is to say, okay, if there's restrictions in terms of what you can do with advertising, let's say on your formal platforms like social media, Google, and how do you engage then with third parties that have digital assets? So people with mailer lists, people with obviously web assets or high traffic websites. So we lean towards the performance marketing route, where we do affiliate campaigns.
I was about to ask you about
because there's obviously no restrictions if you work with affiliates.
Yes.
So we have a dependency on that model. I wouldn't say that it's perfect. I think there's still lessons to be learned, and I think there's still something that we could probably carve out, depending on how we position it on the likes of Facebook and Google. So yes, there's regulations, but I think as a brand or as a sub-brand, you can probably be quite intelligent in terms of campaigns that you do. That's not necessarily related to vape, but that could be something top of the funnel that you can then drive to the other entity. So we're playing around with ideas. But I think marketing-wise, definitely, it's been my biggest challenge to date.
And it's also good because you're going to learn from it.
Definitely.
So let's talk about the actual digital marketing. So, I mean, we are, focusing on small business owners for this podcast specifically. And I would love to, just pick your brain on how you've gone about marketing these entities, specifically, Crash Detect, because of the fact that you spend about 90% of your time on it. So let's talk about how you started it from a marketing perspective. What was the first thing you've done from a marketing perspective, and how did you scale it, and what are you doing currently? What's working and what's not working?
Yeah, so maybe if we can even take one step backwards, and I think always when you have a new startup, then again, it's nothing other than an assumption, and it's so important to go out there and test the assumption and not to build out this idea quietly, have this massive capex, and then only take it to market to find out that there's no appetite.
Demand for it, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I've done that a lot in my early ventures. So I used to do a lot of dev myself, and it was very easy to gravitate towards something that comes naturally, or something that you are skilled at. And I think many entrepreneurs make this mistake. So I was a developer. So what do? I develop, and that's my definition of working hard. Could be the same if you are, let's say, an architect. Then I mean, you just want to draw plan and 100%. Research plans, and
your strength is your biggest weakness in growing the business.
Exactly, and I think we spoke about it earlier, where I said that self-development is so key, and you need to be brutally honest with yourself and identify the shortcomings that you have. Now, for me, I wasn't somebody that really liked sales. I didn't like really engaging with people. It's something that I had to develop over time.
Yes.
I wasn't even comfortable doing stuff like this. So I had to be very intentional in terms of the skills that I had to
choose
develop.
to grow. Yeah,
absolutely. Because as an entrepreneur, if your business is going to succeed, you need to change. You are the biggest project at the end of the day. You need to be very honest with yourself, identify the shortcomings, and then also realize what's important for the business, because the skills required to run the business is not the same skills required to do dev.
Exactly.
And I think that's where a lot of us make a mistake as a early stage startup, because you've got a tendency to gravitate towards that which comes naturally, like development.
Yeah.
And I worked 18 hours a day. I was working extremely hard, but on all of the wrong things. So I think over time I realized that the way that you come up with a idea and the assumptions that you have around the idea, it's so important to actually go to the market and test it. And one of the eye-openers for me was a book called The Lean Startup, and I think every entrepreneur knows about it nowadays. And then the way that you can take the idea to market and actually be in the street and talk to people about the idea. So I had a tendency to talk to my mum. My mum is there obviously to support. She's going to love anything that I take to her. My mum is not the market. So it's so important to go out there and have this discussion. And I think what's very exciting for entrepreneurs nowadays is if you've got an idea or assumption, the most important thing, in my opinion, that you can do is to build a funnel, even basic, call that your MVP, do a paid campaign, drive people towards that funnel, determine what it's going to cost you to either generate a lead or potentially a sale, and then say, okay, this is something that if I look at my unit metrics, it could potentially work considering the value ladder that I'm going to build downstream, or this is something that's not going to work at all. The big thing is you don't have to be in the street anymore to do that. You can be across the country or the world, literally overnight. And I think as an entrepreneur, it's probably the best skill that you can acquire. It's almost a non-negotiable. It's not something that I think you should just outsource. I think you need to have a deep understanding of how digital works.
Yes.
Because what will happen as a business is you will ultimately compete with all of the other people that also have this at their disposal. So if you don't use that channel, you're not going to be competitive because your cost per lead or your cost per acquisition is just going to be more expensive. If you use above the line or other advertising channels, you are not going to be competitive with your competitor.
100%.
So if you don't understand that, if you don't understand that skill or acquire that skill in order to do digital marketing, then I think, you probably on risk.
So keep in mind, so we're a digital marketing agency, and that's exactly what we've noticed. So there's a lot of small businesses who we can't help just because of the fact that our management fees alone, on top of the spend that they have to put into the platforms, won't allow for affordable customer acquisition.
Yeah.
And we've spoken in a previous podcast with Gilbert about the e-commerce podcast that we had, fundamental tips on e-commerce marketing, and we said that people don't know their own pricing. So they would start an online store, the margins are very low, and the product's cost would be $300 or $400. If you're making 50 Rand or 100 Rand on that product, having to pay for an agency, having to pay for our services, plus Facebook, you have to sell a lot of volume. And that becomes really difficult to market in a country like South Africa, where we are, I would say, not on the level of, Europe and, the US when it comes to adapting e-commerce. We are growing, obviously, and every year it's growing. I think there was like 15 billion in e-commerce spend, or they predict 15 billion in e-commerce spend this year. But at the same time, you need to know your own numbers.
I think it's so important. So the agency has got a very, very important role to play. But I think the agency has a dependency on the business owner or entrepreneur to define what the strategy is. So it's your responsibility to understand the customer, to understand the positioning, to understand the proposition, to build the plan, so that you can hand over the plan in order for the agency to execute against the plan.
Exactly.
Otherwise, if the agency has to take responsibility for that, then you're taking responsibility for the business holistically, and that's not your responsibility. Yeah. The entrepreneur has specific responsibilities, I feel, related to the business.
That's what we've realized. We becoming a small business consulting firm in a way, because there's a lot of small businesses we work with, and where we realized where the business owners, they have this great idea, but they probably haven't done. They haven't asked themselves the honest questions, and they haven't answered that honestly in a sense of do I actually know how to go about doing this? One, and two, do I know my numbers to make sure that I can afford, the service for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months, and what needs to happen in the next 6 months to make me a return as a business owner?
Absolutely, and it's so important to understand the numbers. So if we can go back to Crash to Tech, so I identified 2 distribution channels. The one is the dealerships, because I had existing relationships in that channel, and then obviously digital. So in the past, what I would have done is I would have said, this is a good idea, because as per my assumption, it's a good idea, and my mum would have clapped hands in the background, and then I would have developed this. I would have spent like a year and a lot of money to develop the solution, only then to take it to market to hear that this is not what the market wanted. So that was my approach in the past. Whereas with Crash Tech, I said, okay, how do you re-engineer or reverse engineer this, where you start with the product, you market the product without it even existing in order to get feedback, because your distribution channels need to work, because otherwise you don't have a sustainable business. So I literally came up with a sales presentation for the dealership channel. I went out to market and I signed up 50 dealerships, 100% closure rate on that product. And I knew I had a distribution channel there. Yes. And I told them we are just 2 months away with the product. There was not one line of code written. There was actually nothing. Yes. But it looked as if there was something. So we spent quite a bit of money just on the branding to make it look nice and to give people this idea of, this is actually something. Which
the shell was there.
The shell was there. And we did exactly the same with the landing page. So I sold the subscription as if it existed.
Yes.
There was nothing, not one line of code.
Yeah.
So we had this mock-up of the app.
Yeah.
This is the proposition. So
I need to put a disclaimer that's saying that this is a risky tactic, and you need to know what you're doing.
You absolutely need to know what you're doing.
If you're a business owner that doesn't understand code, and you selling a product that's 2 months away, but it's going to take 2 years, that's a different story.
Absolutely, but you can also manage the expectation of that user. So it's interesting what you can do. And I think over time you get more comfortable with the process. But the most important thing that you can do is it's much easier to manage the expectation of the customer.
Yeah.
If they go through a workflow to buy something which does not exist, compared to building something, spending all of this money only to then find out that there was no appetite for the product whatsoever. So what was interesting is our product, or Crash to Tech, in the digital space failed big time initially with the first campaigns, which was my first assumption of what it should have been.
Yes.
So if I proceeded to develop according to that assumption, business dead. We then learned the lessons in terms of what the proposition should be, the positioning of the proposition, and the actual benefits. And only then, when we were able to drive down the lead cost, when we were able to drive down the acquisition cost, we were sitting on something where I said, this is now something where we've got a payback period which could work.
Yes.
Where we could actually table it with the investor and say, there you go.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the most important thing for entrepreneurs, to go through it, apply yourself. The idea is worthless. The action and the execution against the idea will bring something truly beautiful, because that's where you learn the lessons and you actually build the value. Because initially the idea was worthless in its first iteration, but after about 3 months we were sitting on something, because I had hard stats and facts where I could prove that if we apply X, we'll see Y. If I put in a rand here, I'll get a 1.50 there. So I think that's so important for entrepreneurs. And if ever I engage with entrepreneurs now, and I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship, so I even do master classes every now and then when I get time, where I teach them about like testing your assumptions and using digital. This is always the thing that I am on, especially now, because it's a skill that you can acquire, and it's probably the most important skill, because if you spend like 20% of your time on this, it's probably going to give you 80% of the return. It's so important.
So you've touched on something that I actually listened to it this morning, but it sounds like you're someone that's read Russell Brunson's books. Like obviously the way you speak, his voice resonates in the back of my mind. But I was listening to his podcast actually, and he mentioned that it's not about being the expert in the field or the industry necessarily. So if you are launching a new strategy or a new funnel or a new idea or a new product, like you're saying, it's always an assumption. But what makes you better than the next person is to discover the insights, process it and make meaning out of it, and then adapt accordingly rapidly. So exactly. that is what makes one entrepreneur successful versus another, because you both came up with the same shell idea. It's like, ooh, this is a great idea. But on the execution part of it, it's about learning as quickly as possible and then executing even quicker.
Absolutely. So you need to like rapidly fail / learn. That really is the secret. And I mean, it's not easy. There's a lot of hard work. You need to like part with a big ego if you have one, because you are going to fail, like guaranteed, like any new campaign that we launch. And I mean, I've been doing this also like for many years. I always know, and I always tell my partners, I say, like, brace yourself. We're going to fail for the next 2 months. But we're going to learn the best lessons, and that puts us, because we work so hard on it. If we like continuously fail for 2 months, I feel that it puts us 2 years ahead of the market, because we like outplay them.
Exactly, yeah. Because the next person, they still have to learn those lessons.
They have to learn the lessons, and it's only after you've learned the lessons that you actually unlock the value.
Yeah.
And that's what you should be working towards, I think, continuously.
No, awesome, man. And so I think the next question would be, what have you guys done and what's worked really well for Crash Detect and some of the other businesses?
Yeah, so it's interesting. What works for one business doesn't necessarily work for another business. So for Crash Detect, from day one, I realized like this is not something that somebody is going to like search for on Google, like a car crash being detected on a phone.
You have to create the intent to buy the product.
Yeah, so most people still don't realize that you can do this like on the phone. Funny enough, it's interesting because even with some of the other campaigns, if we position this as the primary benefit or the initial hook or call to action, people are still slightly confused. And it costs you money to drive people across the line so that they're no longer confused. And you don't have that luxury because it increases your acquisition cost.
It's you spending money on education.
Yeah, so one of the like key benefits where we started is actually not something that we lead with on any of the campaigns. So we'll typically lead with the in case of emergency tag.
Okay.
That we, let's say, give away for free.
Okay.
Where we say there's a specific problem on the roads where if you're in a serious car crash, then there's a good chance that you're going to get incorrect medical treatment. So we've got a campaign where it's a paid benefit typically, but on that specific campaign, we'll give the medical ID away for free.
Okay.
So it gives us an opportunity to provide value to the customer. It's a life-saving benefit that you sign up for free. And then we also like very intentional with that campaign, because keep in mind, along with the medical ID, we ask you for what? All of your information.
Yes. Great.
So in essence, what we are, although we do crash detection and a lot of the other stuff, in terms of where we are now in the automotive vertical, we're much more of an affinity / data play.
Yes.
Now, if I say data play, it's like providing value to a user, but monetizing you downstream, because we've got different services and products within the automotive vertical that we like give to you. So we onboard you with high affinity because there's great value for a life-saving service, which is the ICE tag that we give to you for free.
Love it.
And now this gives us the opportunity to continue building that relationship. So that initial onboarding journey is so important in terms of how we position it. It's not generic, so we use contextual awareness where we push the data attributes into a third-party platform and then customize the way we communicate with you. So if you have not completed your medical information, I'll say, Yandre, you're at risk.
Yeah.
Please remember to
fill it in. Yes.
Yeah, and then the call to actions again will be via push, SMS, or email.
But people don't understand how important those follow-ups are.
Like, and I think even more so nowadays. So you've got like generic templates that I think a lot of the guys use. I think it's so important to put in the extra work and then customize the comms. So for us, it's so important to understand like where you are on this journey and where we've touched you or where something is missing, and then to use that contextual awareness to make it extremely personalized.
Yeah. But still automated, obviously.
It is automated in entirety, but the user would never know. And I think that is like a big secret, because again, what happens then, because it's so highly contextual, your open rates are higher, and then ultimately your conversion is higher, which means the net effect for the business is it's more profitable.
But even if the user did know, like people are becoming much smarter. They're becoming smarter and smarter every single year when it comes to these marketing strategies, because marketers ruin everything for everybody. Yeah. But even if they did know it was automated, it's still personalized communication, and it's still important. Yeah. So it's still important that you pay attention to this message, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. Whether it's actually an individual sending you that mail or a system, it doesn't matter. Yeah. One, it's important, and two, it's personalized. So that's all that they're going to care about.
Absolutely, and I think for us, it's so important to really like build a great relationship with the customer and to really be value focused. And just coming back to the different channels we use, obviously we've got a preference to do social media, because again, you can advertise something like the medical ID on Google, but nobody's going to go looking for it, to be fair.
So Google's all intent-driven for those listening, and social media is where you actually create the intent.
Yeah, right? And I think the exciting thing nowadays is if you, again, look at the funnel and then percentages, I mean, very few people, call it like 3% of the market, is like extremely intentional in terms of what they're looking for. I'm looking for a plumber now.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a massive cost attached to that, because, I mean, you're going for people bottom of the funnel, and I mean, there's high intent, which means, I mean, the chances of... So there's going to be a lot of competition for that specific lead. And then you've got this beautiful space, which is Facebook. So I really enjoy doing Facebook or social media advertising specifically, because you've got this massive audience. And in South Africa, you'll probably know better than me, but I think we're sitting on 23, 24 million people active more than 3 hours per day.
Correct, 100%.
So your customer is definitely on there. Your customer is definitely on
I want to touch on that, because I was in a meeting yesterday where someone said, we only want to do LinkedIn ads. And it was a company that I think, in essence, misunderstood what LinkedIn actually... Well, the difference between LinkedIn and Facebook. One is obviously more business focused. I completely understand that, and I think everybody understands that. Facebook's more where people go to escape. I don't want to think about business. I'm going to go here to entertain myself or catch up on the news. Instagram is probably more for entertainment, and YouTube's more for entertainment and learning. But no, nonetheless, I said to her, look, if the person's got a LinkedIn profile, I promise you now, he's definitely got a Facebook profile.
Guaranteed.
The thing with Facebook is, the problem is that people just do, and this is what a lot of business owners do themselves, is that they focus on targeting people based on the interests that Facebook obviously provides. That's very top level. So what I did explain to this company is that if that managing director has got a LinkedIn profile, I promise you now he's got a Facebook profile. The thing that you need to do is find out how the hell do you reach this guy on Facebook?
Yes.
And how do you bridge his psychological mindset from I'm here to escape to, hey, I'm interested in this piece of information or value or service that you're offering.
Absolutely.
Because it's that I'm here to escape. You need your ad then needs to technically bridge that psychological moment of escapism, bridge it into, hey, this is something interesting that I would like to inquire about or learn more about. And I think a lot of people do direct selling on Facebook, which is business driven, but the psychological mindset is like, I'm not here to do business.
Absolutely. So I think that's probably like the worst campaign that you can do. I think like all the campaigns there needs to be value focused, where you give something like free in return, obviously, for information so that you can build the relationship. But I don't think it stops there. I think it's almost as if Facebook will penalize you on a CPL fee as a result of your inability to target the right people.
Exactly,
because
they will.
Keep in mind that Facebook, at the end of the day, is still there just to provide a great experience to users, because they've got like retention numbers in terms of bringing people back to that platform.
If people don't enjoy the platform, they're going to leave.
Exactly. So they really have a preference, I think, for advertisers that put in the effort to understand like who the actual customer is. So people that really like put in the effort to say, okay, this is, let's say, first level of customer avatar. And on my customer avatar, I've used, let's say, 16 to 20 data points to define who this person is.
Yes.
So with interest level targeting, you can do that in Facebook. So you can start off with your assumption of what the customer is. Because
business owners, are you listening?
Yeah, you only have, let's say, 20 data points, which is like really just an assumption.
Yes.
So I would say do your targeting around that customer avatar that you've defined, so as one ad set, but then throw that net a little bit wider and then build up the pixel data to see who else converts against, let's say, respective offers.
Yeah.
Now, the
I need to
important
pause there, just to explain to people what a pixel data is. So it's a little piece of tracking code from Facebook that you can put on your site, which will then basically store information. Oh, that sounds a bit, too direct. But I mean, essentially what happens is it stores the behavior of the users, and you will have the ability to retarget those people. So if you've just been on Takealot and you get off and you see the exact same product in your feed, then that is the use of a Facebook pixel that they've obviously used to retarget you.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can do the retargeting, which is obviously a great strategy, but I think it's also like very important when you come up with this initial definition or assumption of your customer avatar, you are using like your limited idea of who a customer is. Because it's nothing other than what? The assumption. And we spoke about it earlier. So, like, drive the assumption, test the assumption, and get to a point where you actually truly understand who the customer is. Now, here's the thing. Facebook, Google, all of these big companies understand us a lot better than even our mom understands us.
Very true.
So the reality is I've got 20 data points on a customer as per my initial assumption. Facebook will have 5,000 data points. Mm-hmm. So if I've got people that goes through a campaign, the pixel data is firing, we're building intelligence on people that typically show interest in the specific offer that I have. Now I can obviously build out the lookalike audience. So I always say that the lookalike audience is going to give you the ability to leverage off who the actual customer is. As per not 20 data points, as per 5,000 data points. I have to
chip in here. Like, that's what I wanted to add, is that our biggest success comes from lookalike audiences.
Exactly.
And the more data you give Facebook, the better it becomes. So what we've done is that we have taken, for example, the last 2 years worth of businesses that have inquired with us, decision makers. And I mean, there's like 300-400. I mean, I think essentially if you can get up to 1,000, that's great. And we've just said to Facebook, hey, go look for some of the people in this.
Exactly.
And it's working like a bomb. And I think that's what people don't understand from Facebook. They just go and click the boost button, target people interested in pets if they're selling, obviously, pet-related products.
Yep.
And then they're not making a sale. And then they get upset with Facebook. And it's like, hold on, there's more to it than that.
Exactly that. And it comes back to what I said earlier. Ultimately, they're still just a business. There's key metrics within that organization where they want retention numbers, where they want people to return. Now, reality is that, I mean, that ad of yours is probably not going to get a lot of airtime if it's going to be a bad user experience due to your inability to target the right people.
Yeah. And it's your inability to understand what people actually want.
Exactly. And the ability to understand what people want, you can leverage off Facebook's intelligence. You can leverage off Google's intelligence. So that's why I say it's such an important skill to acquire, to understand how you like cherry pick customers. Because if you can continuously put the right proposition in front of the people that it resonates with, then it ultimately reduces your acquisition fee.
Exactly.
And Facebook starts clapping hand because you constantly like showing value to people. So I would love to see actually what the core algorithm like looks like.
Yeah.
And how this is taken into consideration because it's such a fundamental part on digital marketing.
Yeah.
And I think the people that put in the effort and that apply themselves and then get the skill where they know that they can have like this great product market fit and they can leverage off of what Facebook has put all the time and effort into building.
Yeah.
Then there will be preference given to them. And if I say preference, I mean it's lower CPL, lower CPS, which means you've got a feasible business. So for the listeners, some of my personal experiences where we started with campaigns, the first iteration we would have paid $250 a lead.
Yes.
And those same campaigns after 3 months, so completely like not feasible to continue with that in the first iteration. Then with some tweaks, effort, and leveraging of the capability of the algorithms that's available to us, we get those CPLs down to $5.
Love it.
So you start off with $250, but you end up at like a $5.
Yes, yes.
So it's so important like to put in that effort because something that was a complete failure due to continuously executing, learning, split testing, getting to a point where you can now say this is a sustainable business because we had to get like I think $15 CPL on that specific campaign and we got it down to $5.
That's lovely. So your ROI was just higher. Yeah, I mean,
it's just higher and higher.
It's just more profit, The one thing I wanted to say was that, one thing that you need to remind me is I want to show you like some of the funnels that we've built for some of our clients, but specifically for our own business. I think you're going to find it very interesting because we can see exactly what it costs for someone to take the first step in learning more about our business, then actually go through the whole funnel, and I can see what the cost of each part of that funnel is, up until the point where they convert, and you can measure your ROI, and then you can decide what portion of that you want to put back into your marketing. And I'm assuming that's what you guys have been doing.
Exactly. So I think the big benefit is that you've got access to all metrics. So you need to measure literally everything, like every step of the process. You need to understand like where there's friction, and you need to pave the way to conversion. So you need to remove friction in order for people to convert. And the beautiful thing is with digital, you are able to do that. That, honestly, Andre, in my world, 99% of spend is going towards digital, because it's something that I think I understand. There's no channel that competes with it. And I've had some interesting discussions with the radio stations and with printed media where I said, okay, well, guys, this is like what we're doing here. So I'm not going to pay like for above the line campaigns. I'll do like a shared risk model, where if we can come back to like the core metrics for my business, which is CPL or CPS, and we can do this sustainably in your environment, then happy to do that. And I think this is going to happen more and more and more, because think about it. Now I drive like towards the podcast from Midrand to Sandton today, and I'm bombarded with ads, which again has no relevance. Compared to Facebook, where, then again, I'm very like intentional with my Facebook users as well. I always tap on ads,
I'm
which
exactly
I like.
the same. I actually save ads, like sometimes I like, because I'm going to learn from it, one, and two, I want to see more of that.
Exactly that. So it's so funny because some people say, you need to use social media less. No, you just need to be more intentional with how you use social media. So if you tap on, let's say for me, it's like business interest, and let's say tech, I'm bombarded with things that I really love on Facebook. For me, it's a great experience.
Yeah, I love it.
And the wonderful thing there for the advertiser, again, is that they're getting in front of the people where it's going to resonate.
Actually matter, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with above the line, a lot of the other advertising channels, they don't have that capability.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But yeah, the fact that we can measure everything, and that you can split test everything, and then improve everything that you do in the business, allows you ultimately to squeeze out more margin, be more competitive, and then ultimately, like even in our environment, like develop products which initially would not have worked at all.
100%, man. And I think just to take a step back, we talked about, intent-driven digital marketing. When it comes to budgets, that's where you spend 99% of your budget. I was on an interesting podcast last week where we talked about brand building, and a lot of the discussion was traditional marketing. And yes, even though it's declining, I do think there is a place for it, if depending on what kind of company you are. But more so, bigger brands who have the budget in order to be everywhere, because that's what marketing is all about. Look at Coca-Cola, they're everywhere. Like I was in Mozambique, every single cafe is painted, Vodacom, because in that market that works. Like it's completely red with the Vodacom logo, and that works for them. So it's all about finding out where's your target audience spending their time. And if it's a traditional medium, then great. But I do think if you need to consider the budget and the actual cost of, the impressions at the end of the day, because that's what it comes down to. A billboard and the amount of people who have intent versus seeing that versus Facebook, what the actual cost will be, and then the benefit return on that cost. One, you're building up data that you can actually leverage. Two, it's actually more intent driven than just someone driving past the billboard, and the costs are lower, and you can track everything. So as a small business owner, and medium-sized business owners, I think 99% of your spend or 100% of your spend should always be on digital, because of the fact that that's where you get the biggest success. But as the company grows, you'll probably find that traditional means of marketing, depending on the channel, depending on the cost, and obviously depending on the execution, could boost everything else for you.
That's, I think, how you should do it.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about small and medium-sized businesses, I can use myself as an example. So we were fortunate enough to win a couple of competitions with the crash detection technology.
Oh, cool.
So
Congrats.
The guys gave us a lot of airtime. I had radio interviews, and then we sat there for 30 minutes. And then I said, well, what would the cost of this interview be? It was probably like going to be 150 to 200,000 rand for that interview if you had to pay for the interview. What was remember I spoke about the business exclusively for 30 minutes, like prime time. And my net result out of that in terms of onboards, or let's say users, 3 or 4. Now, let's assume for a second it's a 200,000 rand exercise, and I get 4 free users. It's 50,000 bucks per user.
Yeah.
Compared to, let's say, a 5 rand that I mentioned earlier.
100%.
And ultimately, and I explained this to them before. We don't want to pay somebody to be famous. We want to pay somebody to be rich. I mean, you want to make money at the end of the day with your business.
Exactly.
So I think for a small and medium-sized business, absolutely digital is the way to go. Billie Jean actually did a very interesting little exercise. I don't know if you've seen it.
I know him quite well, but I haven't seen the exercise.
So what he did is he booked out this massive billboard next to the highway. So, I mean, his face was on there and big story and whatever. The billboard itself didn't do anything. Then what he did is he hired a helicopter, shot digital footage, video footage of the billboard and ran an ad on Facebook of the billboard. And that shot the lights out. So that digital ad, promoting what he's done, above the line, is the thing that actually got him a net return.
Yeah, just shows you.
So, I think for small and medium-sized businesses, again, coming back to what I said earlier, this is the best channel. If you've got a new startup or, there's new products that you need to test or new benefits, then this is the channel that you need to use.
I'm so scared people think that I paid you to say that.
No, I'm so passionate about this because I think for a long time, it's almost prohibitive because if you start with a new company, and I mean, these channels weren't available a couple of years ago.
Exactly, yeah.
So you start with a business and you're like, how did they do it?
I want to ask you a question. When did you spend your first cent on Facebook?
My first cent on Facebook, I think, was probably 5 years ago.
That was 2015?
Yeah.
So I spent my first cent on Facebook 2011 December.
Really?
So, and the only thing that you could do at that time was page likes.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even change the image. All you could do was, it just pulls in your profile picture. So it was my profile picture and said, do you want to like this page? Or said something like this page to follow its updates or something like that. And that's all you could do. But back then, I had 60-70% organic reach.
Yeah.
So every single person that liked my page for 10 cents, 20 cents at that time, if I posted something, they saw what I had to say.
Yeah.
So that's how I drove traffic to my first internet business.
That's
is that I didn't know how to do SEO. It was just too complicated. And
I agree.
I Googled how to do SEO or how to drive traffic. Google said, search engine optimization. I Googled how to do search engine optimization. And then I was like, damn, I don't know how to do that. So I said, drive traffic without search engine optimization. And then the one guy said, start a Facebook page. And I was like, how to start a Facebook page? And that's literally my rabbit hole. And 10, 20 cents are I got to 250,000 people following my Facebook page. I was a competitor for Men's Health at the time, but my brand wasn't as big, but the traffic I was generating was close to Men's Health's website traffic. And that's how I started monetizing that business of ours. So 100% agree. I couldn't agree more. Every single cent should be accounted for. If it's digital, traditional, doesn't really matter. But if you need to make sure that every single cent counts across the board, no matter what size business you are. But I think it's safe to say that digital is that channel.
It is. I think that the other reality is that this is a skill set that's forever going to be evolving. So digital moves extremely quickly. I mean, that's where you started 2011. Look at what we do today with campaigns. And you always almost need to go where the customers are. I think voice is going to be instrumental going forward. So there's quite a big investment from my side in terms of our service capabilities and our proposition, exposing that by means of a medium where people, I think, will engage downstream. Obviously, data cost and is still a little bit of a concern in South Africa, although there's some positive movement from industry, Vodacom and the others slashing prices. But I think it is important to say this, or let's say this specific channel, digital, is one that probably delivers the best results. In my case, not probably, definitely delivers best results. And how do you stay on top of that game? And ultimately, as a business owner, I mean, that is probably your primary responsibility.
Yes.
Because we are dependent on what? Sales. And how do you drive sales? Well, this is probably the best channel to do it with. 100%. Again, not probably, definitely.
Tell me something. We're going to end off with the last, question, I think, and that's, well, it's not really a question. It's just your top tips basically for the audience. And I think if you had to start from scratch, right? I mean, you start from scratch regularly because you're always busy with new ventures.
That's true.
But I mean, let's say you had nothing, and you had a couple of grand in the bank, even a couple of $100. how would you go about it, and essentially what would your steps be? Like you spoke about reaching out to people, then you say get the feedback, then you said something like I really loved that, like building a bit of a shell and then taking that. Like if we can end the podcast off with like walking people through that system that you have in mind, that'll be great.
Yeah. So what I will do is, if it's purely just an assumption or a new idea for a business, especially if you like limited on funds, then first of all you want to, on the digital side, you want to like make it look nice. So I think that's always like quite important, especially with the ads that you want to run.
True.
So what I'll typically do is I'll engage with like 3 designers on Fiverr. So they slap something together that we can use as a Euro image, let's say as an ad image. Then I'll play around with different ideas around the call to action. So the copy is like really critical. And then I'll probably, again, if you're like limited for budget, go exclusively on social, where I try and drive value around a proposition that I can give away for free in order to build a relationship with that customer. And then say, if I build out this funnel where the first one is purely just to, let's say, get the lead magnet, a little piece of value, in order to then jump onto a second page where I give another offer to the customer in order to have like the ultimate offer, which are paid, I'll probably take a customer through those steps. And to the listeners that have not done this before, you might say, okay, yeah, but I mean, it sounds complicated. The reality is it's not that complicated.
Yeah, you just have to put in the time.
You have to put in the time. And the graphical assets you can get very cheaply.
Yes.
On the likes of
Fiverr that you mentioned is a freelance service, www.fiverr. I think it's got 2 R's at the end.com.
It
so
does.
For those listening, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, they can very quickly do like a very basic CI for you for this idea. Then I'll use a third-party tool like Unbounce or Lead Pages, any one of those. I mean, there's a 14-day free trial on most of these software programs. Literally, it can take you 2 days to build a landing page.
And on Gmail, you can create 10 email addresses.
There we go. And then, you build out, let's say you channel traffic towards a landing page. That's one option. Or otherwise, it could be a lead form on Facebook. But let's assume that you're channeling them towards a landing page. It's just understanding what the fundamentals are on a landing page. It's the Euro image, Euro text, or let's say a private header text, call to action, benefits, and then the testimonials.
Yes.
So once you understand the structure, that structure is going to remain with you forever. It doesn't really change.
100.
So you take the ad, run the ad, channel it towards the page, channel them towards the offer, see if you can get any like upsells on the offer, and you can build this out. I mean, yes, Chandra, I did a campaign like this like 2 weeks ago. I think it took me like half a day to build that whole flow. Obviously, I've been doing this for a while, but I mean, somebody that doesn't understand it can probably do it in a week.
Yeah.
And the lessons that you learn from that, in terms of the assumption that you've had and the net effect or the net result,
100%,
is going to be insane. And I think once you've got a taste of that, where you can see people engaging with the offer or not engaging with the offer for that matter, and you tweaking, and then they start engaging, it's brilliant. It's a big eye-opener.
Yes.
We did a campaign where we had a fuel reward, and on that specific landing page where we channel traffic, we changed one word in the header text.
Yes.
That had 40% result
That's
on conversion.
crazy.
Just one word. So it's so important that everything and anything that you do in digital, there's always an assumption. There's always room for improvement. That first concept that you launch, let's say after a week, after you have the nice design from Fiverr and you have the landing page, probably will fail, but it's going to learn you valuable lessons. So keep on pivoting and build something that ultimately works and that's sustainable like downstream.
And the thing is that you're going to get traction in the right areas, and that's where you start focusing, right?
Absolutely.
No,
and where there's
love it.
friction, I mean, you can identify where the friction is, and you can obviously sort out the friction. It's very easy then to run different split tests to say, okay, but why do we not have conversions on this specific step?
Yes.
Russell has got a very nice way of explaining it. He always says it's very easy business, especially digital business. It's hook, story, offer.
Yeah.
Hooks to everything that you do.
Get their attention, tell them something that obviously gets them emotionally invested, and
if
then
it's
give them
if it's a cold audience, I mean, it's an ad, and then you tell the story on the landing page, and then you've got the offer page, like I just explained. But once they're in your environment, now you send out a mail to that customer. You've got a hook again. It's the subject. You've got the story again, and then you've got the offer again. So whenever a campaign is not succeeding, there's either something wrong with your hook, or your story, or your offer.
Yeah.
So be very again, intentional around like every aspect, the hook, the story, and the offer. Improve each, split test each, and then eventually the net effect comes down from a 250 to a $5.
And the thing is, any business owner can literally copy this mindset. I mean, it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to implement from a practical standpoint when example, a coffee shop on the road, like down the road or whatever it is. But I mean, that exact example, if we have to walk through that for a second, is you have your location on Facebook. You can GEO target people in a 5K radius. You can say, free coffee on Mondays if you leave your email address or whatever it is. And that's how you start building up a direct marketing channel, for example. And that's where you can now start offering people, different. Tell them a little bit more about the company, give them an idea of what you're all about, and give them different offers every week or whatever it is. Getting them to come back.
Don't just stop there. I mean, now that you've got the data and you've got affinity with the data, then do a weekly mailer where you tell them about coffee.
Yeah.
Then a month later, go further where you say, okay, but we also have coffee deliveries.
Yes.
Our finest roasters coffee now delivered to you for the ridiculous price of whatever, and that's the offer. So it's funny because you can build out a value ladder once you've got a captive customer, because as soon as they're in your environment, then obviously
100%.
I mean, they are acquired, which means the communication to them is like next to nothing, and that opens up many new opportunities. For me, it's very true in the business we're working on now, is like vest the user, get the user into your environment for the lowest cost possible. And we were lucky because what we did is we built out campaigns where we go with paid ads, then we put offers in front of the customer to get the customer, by the time that they like in the database or in our environment, we don't pay anything for the customer. So we vest the customer basically for no fee whatsoever. So we call it a self-liquidating offer. So you've got paid ad.
Exactly. It's paying for your advertising.
It's paying for your advertising. So now you've got this audience that's growing, but we know that we can continuously re-engage with this audience. Again, value-based.
Yeah.
But that then pushes up our ARPU, which is our average revenue per user. So now you say, okay, if I can make like, let's say, R2 per user that I have here, not everybody's going to convert against the hook story offer that you offer.
Exactly.
But a percentage
and you need to be okay with that.
You need to be okay with that. But if you've got a business where, let's say, you're getting people for free, and then over time you're making R5 or R6 per user on that list, then you've got a very nice business. And I think a lot of other businesses that are a little, let's say, more location-based, they can be more creative in terms of their offering and their value ladder, because they can offer like different products and services within this vertical to the customer, I feel.
Yes.
Because there's so much more you can do with the customer.
No, I love it, man. And I think to round it off and then just end off, I want to say, like, to conclude what we've said, is that you guys need to make every single cent count when it comes to your investment. So it's about knowing your numbers, really planning out how you're going to spend the budget that you have and what kind of return you need in order to continue growing. And then measuring everything down the line and testing in order to find those barriers, improve the friction where you can in order to, allow for a smoother ride. And from our side, I think, Jaco, I want to thank you for coming through. You've added a lot of value to everybody listening, watching, reading. So, thanks for coming. Thanks for your time. We know you're a busy man.
Thanks for the invite.
There was definitely awesome value, and I enjoyed having you here for every second that you were here. I really enjoyed the conversation, and that's what I want to say. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks to you as well.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next week again. All the best, and have a good one.